Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Woods Collab podcast. I am Mike Woods, and
I am Nikisha Woods.
all right, and we have a topic today. It's a bit of a carryover from what we talked about last time pertaining feedback and courageous conversations. Now, today we're going to talk about feedback from the other perspectives. Last time we talked about giving feedback, so sharing our perspective, sharing our thoughts, sharing our ideas. This time we're going to talk about receiving feedback, being on the opposite end of that. Someone got feedback for you. Let's talk about how you receive that. It's not always a thing that, feels very comfortable, but we're going to get into it. But before we do, please make sure that you like the Woods Collab podcast, you subscribe to the Woods Collab podcast, and you share the Woods Collab podcast with your friends, your family, and your professional network as we help each other, help ourselves, help us all be our best selves.
Good.
So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So receiving feedback. So let's talk about that. That's one thing. A lot of times we don't. Sometimes I won't say a lot of times. Sometimes we don't want to hear about ourselves. So what makes, especially when you're talking about a personal or in a professional environment, what makes that receiving feedback so difficult, would you say?
Oh my gosh. So it is like holding up a mirror in front of you, and it's not always something you don't know. It might be something that you kind of suspect, or it might be something that you're insecure about, or something that you've been working on and you think that you've come so far, and then someone holds that mirror up to say, hey, by the way, I've noticed this. And it can make your heart sink into your stomach for a little bit. And it can also make you respond defensively. It can make you question yourself. It can make you question that person and their motives. And so I think for me, it's definitely been a journey on receiving feedback. But for you, what would you say that makes it difficult for you to receive it?
I think it depends. So there's a few different factors. So I know sometimes, this is what I thought about it. Sometimes you just don't want to hear it. Like you talk about holding that mirror up.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to just be able to carry on, go about your business, proceed with what you're doing. And then here comes someone with really what it is their opinion or a need. And it requires you to give something else beyond what you're giving. And sometimes you just don't want to.
Yeah.
Sometimes literally like, okay, hey, I got something for you. Need you to start doing this or that. But at times it's like, I just don't want to. I don't feel like changing anything. That's the one thing that makes it so difficult. I think another thing is it comes with, and it carry over to what we talked about last time, is sometimes it could come with a lack of trust in the person that's providing it. That could be a case as well. So if it's something that you talk to and you build that rapport with, where you all share perspective often, you might be able to receive that. You say, okay, this person has my back. I know this person has my back because I have a point of reference of when that person had my back.
Yeah.
But if it's someone who is coming from left field, from a different space, who has something for you because of their opinion that they think you should get better or change or do different, maybe since you don't have that trust in that person, it's a little bit difficult to receive it.
So I like to use the word perspective sharing when it comes to feedback. Do you feel like there's a difference between when you're receiving feedback, it being an opinion that you're receiving versus a perspective that you're receiving? Or do you think it's all one and the same?
I think it could definitely be overlapped in the same. It can be an opinion because it is my opinion that you change this, or it is my opinion that you come across as that. That could be an opinion because you may ask someone else and someone else does not have that same opinion.
Yeah.
So it could be an opinion. And at the same time, it's perspective. It could be all the same.
Yeah.
So it really depends. It can be a very black and white area, but at the same time, it could be very gray. So we probably need to get into like, how do you decipher between the two? Which is something that you definitely need to maybe consider, think about, because we'll talk about how to receive it in a minute. We'll go layers into that. But it's all, I think it depends on the content. It depends on the person that's receiving it. It depends on the environment. the situation. It also depends on where you are individually.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, what helped me to receive feedback was to separate it from this is that person's opinion to this is that person's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's their viewpoint, it's what they see. And it doesn't make it fact or law. It's just when they see this thing that I do, or when they experience this thing that I do, this is how it impacts them. Therefore, this is their perspective. Now, I could say, you know what? That impacted you this way. This is how you view it. This is how you receive it. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could say, does that align with my intent? Does this change how I would do it next time? Because I do not intend to impact people that way. And if that is the case, is there something within me that I can do the next time I do it so that no one has that experience, or to limit that experience? So yes, I definitely think that that's the thing that, because first thing is, if I'm thinking about it's your opinion, I'm like, okay, you know what they say about opinions. Right. We all got one, just like we got some other body parts, right? So at the end of the day, it's like, I could take it or leave it for sure, either way, whether it's an opinion or a perspective. Mm-hmm. But is this the way that I want this thing to impact someone else or come across to someone else? And if it's not, what is it that I can do to tweak it? Or what is the awareness that that brings, right? If they're looking at the same thing that I'm looking at and they see something different, what awareness does that bring to me? So that's kind of how I'm, I might not change anything, but I'm thinking about it. So the next time I move, I'm thinking about, well, is there something that I could tweak? If not, if I'm gonna keep it the same way, at least I know that that's a perspective. Because the thing is, not everyone is gonna share their perspective with you.
Right.
And then you could, especially, in the world that I work in often, is training, right? One person could say, this particular point didn't land, and I'm thinking to myself, I killed it, right? It landed. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna think about, in the future, how can I make this point land for more people? Have more people see this thought or this point of view or this thing that I am presenting in a way that is favorable versus dismissing that perspective that was shared. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. And yes, you're absolutely right. Now there's value in that. There's value in entertaining the feedback that's provided. So we're talking about being on that recipient end. So I was given feedback. How do I accept it? How do I take it all in? So there's value in taking a look at it to see, okay, let's see if there's something here that I could take advantage of. Is it truly, maybe I'm missing a mark? Maybe, okay, yep, you know what? Maybe I didn't see it from the left. Maybe I didn't see it from the right. Mm-hmm. There's value in seeing there's something there that can help you out, to help you get better. So like if ultimate goals is promotion or build upon a skill set, there could be some nuggets there that'll help you to get that.
Yeah.
Though, if it's that moment where we're like, you know what, not feeling that at all, we just have to be aware that we're shutting it down. Because there's going to be, I think both of us have encountered that before, even though one has shared their perspective.
He's like, that's trash.
He'd be like, cheers to your perspective. So it's like, it's not, I'm be honest, I don't do it all the time. I may hear it because you want to have a professional rapport and you want to be able, others to be able to talk to you. Mm-hmm. But there's a process where you got to say, okay, cool. Let me first take a step. Got it. Okay, you this, that, and the other. I might ask some questions to get a bit more clarity on that feedback that's given. Mm-hmm. And I might be like, you know what? I appreciate that. Carry on. It might be the case. Okay. It might be the case.
Okay. Does that change depending on the person? So if you're receiving feedback from your leader, your leader's leader, are you more likely to sit with it longer before saying, no, thank you? Like talk to me a little bit. Like, keep it real.
For leaders, what? No. It all depends. It all depends on the situation. Yeah. Because no one's perfect.
Yeah.
No one perfect. It doesn't matter what position one has in an organization, a business, what position they have in family or in a personal relationship. No one is perfect.
Right.
Now, if you're talking about like a leader or leader's leader, there should be some type of rapport and camaraderie built and established with that person, where if you know this person is coming to you with some information, should be at a point to trust it.
Yeah.
And if they're not at that point where you can trust it, there's an opportunity right there to build that relationship.
Okay.
So does that make a difference? I mean, for sure, you need to protect your job if that's what it comes down to. So if like your leader's leader is saying, hey, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if that has a bearing on your job and on your goals, may be very wise to consider 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But at the same time, in no way does that mean you need to just go along with anything.
Yeah.
It could warrant a conversation further. But
of course.
yeah, but I think it's wherever it's coming from, it needs to be examined, assessed, and say, hey, is there something here that I might be missing out on? Does that answer your question? Did I keep it real enough? Or did I hold back a little bit?
I mean, if you're looking to grow in a particular role or field, and your leader is saying, this is what I need from you to execute, you got to take a step back and say, either I'm going to stay here and grow in this role, or I'm going to go somewhere else. And if you're going to stay here in this role, then that's your expectation. That becomes your role expectation. So for me, I think that, so anybody who knows me knows I'm always asking for feedback. Like, you might get tired of me saying, what feedback do you have? Do you have feedback for me? What did you think? What did you think? That type of thing. But I had a situation where it was performance review time, and I received feedback that I had never heard before. And months had passed, I received the feedback, and I'm like, I could have been working on this for 6 months. I could have been changing your perspective around how I show up in this space for 6 months, instead of finding out in this performance review that this is your perspective of me, right? So from that, I just want you to show me your hand. Now, keep in mind, I'm a very calculated person, so I think through everything, right? I want to know your hand. And if I can know your hand, I can understand where I fall, whether you are my leader, whether you're my peer, whether you're a person that reports to me. Like, I want to know what your perspective is so I can know your hand, so I can make sure that we're cultivating the right relationship. Because it shouldn't take a performance review, an engagement summary, some type of measurement that is formalized and documented in a workplace for me to know where we stand and for me to be able to do something about it. Because I may choose, based on your perspective, to change how I show up in that thing. Now, I might not, but I want the ability to do so. And if I'm not asking for the feedback, or if that person doesn't feel comfortable providing it, then I go into a situation where, is it 6 months later and this relationship is damaged? Is it 6 months later and my performance review isn't what I want it to be? Is it 6 months later and I'm not growing and executing the way that I want to, right? And so for me, it's so important to understand that perspective. And then that is how I've been able to grow, because I found out things about myself. I'm like, really? That's how I come across? That's not what I mean to do. That's not my intent.
So how did you...
But now I can get better.
Okay, so you got that feedback. Granted,
yeah.
Yep, cool. Could have got it earlier.
Yes.
Could have got it last month, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
You got it in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So you were surprised by it?
Absolutely.
How did you receive it though? So so you got... So it sounds like to me, you didn't receive that feedback. Or did you receive it?
I received it, but
So how do you receive feedback if you feel it could have been shared a little bit earlier?
I provided that feedback.
The fact of the matter, it wasn't shared earlier.
I provided that feedback. So the last time, you all know, if you watched the last podcast, we talked about leading up or providing feedback to your leader. And I had to provide feedback, like, where was this conversation beforehand? Because there were some gaps in understanding as far as why I made actions that I made. And because that person didn't honor me with the feedback, we're having this conversation when I can't remember even exactly what took place, and they can't either. So then that is, I know that part of the model that you brought up, timely, he talked about that last time, the FAT model that you came up with. timely is a piece of it. It wasn't timely. So we couldn't have a real, authentic, going back to your model, conversation about it. And so I listened, I understood it. But from that point on, it was an aha moment for me, because you can only control what you can control, right? Mm-hmm. From that moment for me, it made me hungry to receive the feedback regularly, right? Not from that, just that person, other people around me, because I never wanted to be in the dark about my own performance. And so in that moment, you know, I was triggered. And receiving feedback, you could be triggered by things. I was definitely triggered by that, but it was a moment for me as far as what can I do to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future.
Okay, so what about the feedback itself? I want to rest in that. I want to rest in that for a moment.
You gotta sit in that.
So let's say that scenario. Let's say someone coming across this podcast will say, "Wow, same thing happened to me." Cool, great. You can get the explanation. The person who was giving it may have learned to change and to provide feedback timely now. Okay, cool. So what did you do with that? So how did you take that feedback and use it to your advantage?
The feedback itself was not well thought out. When specific examples were asked for, they were not provided. So in that moment, the only feedback I got was to get feedback regularly, to be perfectly honest. But I do think that by getting feedback from that person, we were able to build a better relationship, because they knew that it was an expectation of mine to get it regularly and not just at performance review time, right? And as leaders, we should never be in a situation where we're not close enough to our team members. We don't see what they do. We don't understand what they do. That when it's time to do some type of performance review, it's like, pull some stuff out of the hat, right? And then document it. No, don't ever do that, right? So I think for me, the actual feedback that was provided was invalid because it wasn't timely, right? We couldn't have a conversation about the things that took place. There were no specific examples. And so it made it very difficult for me to receive it. But what I did receive from that is for me to not just rely on the fact that this is my leader and they're going to give me the feedback, but for me to actively receive it and actively seek it out.
Yeah, and that's where in any partnership, business relationship, regardless of the role, it's important to have that shared responsibility. So I think a lot of times, and we've learned it in our path to leadership, where there could have been time before where you're, going into a one-on-one or some type of performance review, waiting to sit back and receive. I know we're talking about receiving feedback here, but even when those conversations take place, it's not just, okay, well, let's see what's laid on the table for me, and I'm going to follow up this agenda. That's why a lot of times we have to be that equally invested party in that relationship, as far as like, okay, cool. This is what I'm bringing to the table. All right, thanks for bringing that to the table. I got some feedback for you as well. That shared perspective there. That I would say in my career, feedback that was similar to that, I was able to take that moment and really build a good relationship as a result of it.
Yeah.
Where I was advised, this was years ago, where expectations weren't being met because my perspective.
You weren't meeting expectations.
I was not meeting expectations based on.
Plain. Don't beat around the bush.
No. Because the way you just beat around that one bush, the way you just beat around that, the bush can't be beat anymore. No, so it was the expectations of perspectives. It was not being met. That was just real talk, because my perspective was over here. Their perspective was over here. So in that, we had a conversation. The feedback was shared. It did not feel good. It did not feel, it wasn't, like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
So I felt the same way, where it was a bit untimely. I thought it was a little bit old. Like, hey, I'm out here in deep waters. Like, you saw me going out in this direction. Why did you let me keep going out there? You knew I couldn't swim out there. But at the same time, that opened up conversation. So I'm a fan of having a conversation. also shared the feedback as well. It's like, hey, this could have been a bit more productive if it was provided a bit more timely. And in that fostered a wonderful relationship. But there is, and y'all definitely got to go back to the last podcast if you haven't already to talk about that motto, because we talked about the timely feedback, how it's so important. So that's not to say that all feedback need to be debated, or some of it is valid, some of it is invalid.
Yeah.
But I think it's more so like, take what's being said, evaluate what's being said, process it, and go about your business. But and one thing, you can definitely respect the person that's giving it.
Yeah.
If someone cares, now some people just like to share, like, hey, you might want to consider this, might consider that. If people keep doing that, you're gonna be like, all right, look, you can't. I mean, can't please you with anything. So just stop talking to me. But at the same time, if someone cares enough to share, hey, I want to talk to you about this situation, that's a good opportunity from being that recipient to say, okay, well, let me take in what's being said and let me see if there's some value there that I could apply to improve the situation. So let's talk about, that's one side as far as like how to receive it. But you talked a bit about I think you've labeled yourself as a feedback debater.
No, I did not say that.
So
I don't debate.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Discuss.
So what do you think about, I'm just kidding. So what do you think about the feedback debater? So, you've been in leadership.
Yeah.
And there's times where you may, let's say even your perspective is that you're coming across from a good place.
Yeah.
A good place to help to improve.
I'm invested in this human.
You're bought in. You're sincere. You're like, you want to see this person grow, accomplish their goals. Yeah. But you get in that debate. You talking to that person that was just like you, that just like to debate that feedback. Like, this is
Please
old.
Don't label me. Don't label me. Okay. I will say that a lot of times, in my experience, if the debate spirit comes out when you're even receiving the feedback, so really focusing on receiving the feedback, it's probably because you're so far away from your perspective than the other person. Right? So that you're over here with your perspective, they're over there with their perspective. And so, like you said, from left field, right? So now you have said something that does not align with what I got going on whatsoever. And I, in the moment, want to get you from over here to over here instantly. That's not always the case, because that person has that perspective. There's something called the confirmation bias. So what the confirmation bias is it says that I am looking for things that confirm what I think I already know. And so if I'm going into a conversation with the perspective of X, everything that happens that is remotely related to X, I'm going to feel like it validates my perspective so deeply that it's literally nothing you can say to make me feel differently. And so if we're in a situation where a person has in their mind confirmed what they think they already know without talking to me, and I'm trying to get out of that box that they have put me in, I'm going to say some stuff to get out of that box, right? We all been there, right? We get out that box, right? And so it is where that heart is starting to race. It is where your ears are getting hot and you are like, you are not going to control the narrative of who I am in this situation. And I know I'm a big believer in know your triggers. So you should know the things that trigger you. You should know the things that motivate you or demotivate you. And in feedback, I feel like someone walking in with a bias of any type, assumptions of any type, coming to me with those assumptions as a perspective, we gotta have a discussion, right? You gotta seek to understand my perspective, because if not, I feel like that's where the defensiveness comes out a little bit, because I'm offended that you would assume this about me without talking to me. I don't know, I said a lot, but did it even make sense, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's from the words of a feedback debater. No, just kidding. No, it does make sense. It does make sense. But I think, and I agree with that, you have to definitely evaluate, because if someone is approaching you based on an assumption, that could definitely be offensive. It's like, okay, why would you think that? And that's happened before.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, so I think it goes, that transitions right to the next piece about if feedback is invalid, if it's invalid.
Mm-hmm.
But there's times where you can have a nugget. It's like, okay, cool. Hey, here's some game for you. Boom, let's run this play. And you can run that play and it'll definitely advance your career. So we got to be, at least see what it's about. At least taste it and see. Process it, right?
Yeah, process it.
Take it, process it, see if it's some sauce there that's going to help out. But it's also a case where maybe, just maybe, it's invalid.
Mm-hmm.
It's invalid. That feedback was invalid. So it
you sound like you're speaking from personal experience.
It's happened before.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to what you mentioned about one who may have a perspective based on something that is not the case. Mm-hmm. So what do you do with that? Let's say in a professional setting where, and you talk about, leader and leader's leader and that sort of thing. What if that perspective is invalid? What do you do? And in a professional space, maybe that's challenging. That's challenging. It's like, wow, this person has some influence here.
Yeah.
But this view is not accurate.
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
So, I think we've all received feedback that we didn't agree with, or it triggered us or made us very uncomfortable. I like to not be reactive in it, right? And sometimes it is, I said that I ask for feedback all the time. So sometimes I do brace myself because I don't know what you're about to say, right? You just open up the door for whatever that perspective is. And so I might take a deep breath. I might say, okay, it's coming. Like, am I about to get gut punched, right? But at the end of the day, I feel like I might need that gut punch as a wake-up call. So I'm fine with that, and I'm willing to take it because, like I said, I feel like I know your hand, I know what I'm working with, and I know what I need to do moving forward, especially if it is someone that is leading me and so forth. So I do try to take a pause from it. I think that sometimes it's about being open enough to take in the information without internalizing it. And I think that in the past, I have internalized it, right? I internalize it to be a bigger story than it actually is. Instead of just taking what they're saying as face value, I have said, oh, well, they don't like me. Oh, well, they are biased against me, or they just prefer this other person, or they are just low level, right? Like there's these things that you might tell yourself as a response to it because you're internalizing it and you want to preserve yourself and protect yourself. What I try to do now, which I'm glad we brought up this already, is process it. And so really take a step back. And I say this all the time. Is it me? Babe, this and that, this is the situation. Is it me? Have I ever done that before? Is this how I show up? Because I'm trying to process it in the right context and take myself out of it. Almost like having an out-of-body experience where I'm trying to take myself out of it, my own feelings out of it, and really understand what this person is saying to me. Mm-hmm. But I'm not even going to say like debate. I have a discussion. I want you to understand, because I believe that we control our own narrative, right? And I'm big on that. So if someone is sharing feedback with me, I'm going to give the why. I'm going to give context. I'm going to fill in gaps and holes that they don't have filled in because they didn't talk to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do my best to provide that. And I'm going to do it in a respectful way. And I'm going to do what I can to control that narrative. I also document everything. So there's been times where I've had to say, hey, listen, this is what actually took place. Mm-hmm. And that's just part of who I am, is that I document things and I note things and so forth. But it gets really hard when you get that feedback and you don't have specific examples, because now you can't refer back to what happened. You can't think about the mindset you were in, and that can make it very difficult to receive it for me.
Yeah, I think so. That transitions to the, you mentioned a lot about processing it mm-hmm. versus internalizing it, mm-hmm. because there could also could be a case where those that are giving the feedback may or may not have the right tools in order to get it across.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but they still could have that could be a valid perspective. It could be it could be a gem for you to take and run with. So that difference of processing it versus internalizing it can be very key, because if you, even though it may not be communicated in the right way, it could be something there that you could still pull from. So I agree with the processing the same. It's almost like, let's say for instance, we're going somewhere that you haven't been before, and you got a plate, and then you have these different items that's on a plate. You got your steak, maybe you have your mac and cheese, you may have your bread, you may have your green, or whatever the case may be. And then when it's all said and done, you ate. And if someone were to ask you, did you eat? Your answer would be yes. If they said, did you eat? The answer would be yes. Now, granted, your answer to that question is yes, but maybe you didn't eat everything. Maybe you didn't everything. Maybe you only took a nibble of the bread. Maybe the mac and cheese, you ate all the mac and cheese.
My husband likes analogies. So if this is your first one, stay with him because he's bringing it home. Go ahead and bring it home, baby.
Look, this thing is coming home. I'm rounding third on this one. But if you think about it, you got this plate in front of you. You didn't eat everything. Someone said, "Did you eat?" Yep, I ate. Well, how come you got all that bread left? I didn't eat all the bread. Well, I see the mac and cheese going. Yeah, I ate all the mac and cheese. What about the steak? Oh, I ate the steak. What about the greens? No, I didn't eat the greens. You laughing?
Bring it home.
It's coming home. It's coming home. You gotta be feedback debater right here. That feedback debate is coming.
Don't let me like that. I like that.
So what I'm saying is, when it comes to that feedback, you don't have to take and digest it all. Mm-hmm. It's gonna be some that you'll be like, yep, boom, let me take that play and let me run with it. Thank you. There's gonna be others gonna be like that piece of bread. Like, nah, that bread was hard. That piece of feedback wasn't for me, but I appreciate you for putting it on my plate.
Okay.
So that's that processing versus internalize. You may, when you process, you say, okay, is there something I can do with this? Let me take a pause. Let me think about it. Let me think about my ways. And it could be reflecting in the moment. You may reflect on it later that day, may reflect on it the next day. You may reflect on it next week or next month. But it's a process in processing it. But when you talk about internalizing it, that's where you're taking it personal. Mm-hmm. That could be like, okay, this is how dare this person come at me with that? You know what? You didn't bring that to anybody else. Mm-hmm. That's where it could kind of have an effect on you if you internalize it and you kind of like make it personal, thinking like it's a personal attack, as opposed to processing it and seeing that there's something there that you could have used to your advantage.
Yeah, maybe it's just a little piece of it, or maybe it's that person's delivery. But it's one of those things where if you get some feedback and you're like, you know what, this isn't for me. If you get it again, and then get it again, it's probably some truth to it, right? Because it's very unlikely that multiple people over time will have the same perspective of this thing. And so that's where you have to make a choice, right? Feedback is a choice. You can make the decision that you're going to implement it, or you're going to make the decision that you're not. And whatever that is, you got to be prepared to deal with whatever your decision is around it. So like you talked about, what are your goals, right? If your goal is to stay at a company and grow and maybe receive a promotion and you're not implementing the feedback, then people are going to probably stop sharing the feedback, or probably going to write you off as a person that's not coachable. Versus if it is a situation where you like, this isn't for me, this company isn't for me, then that might be the time where you go somewhere else. But if you go to that next company and get the same feedback,
right,
you got to do the work, right? You got to do some type of work to figure out how can you process it more so that you can move from that defensive phase to that implementation phase.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you said you ask about it a lot. So why is that?
Why do I ask for it a lot?
Yeah, you said you ask for it a lot.
So that has been a process, because that was a thing that I was afraid of. Like, I really don't, if I'm doing something wrong, someone will tell me, and it makes me uncomfortable to receive it. So I don't want to receive it. And so I would disassociate myself from it. But then you find out that you could have been working on something for 6 months and nobody told you, right? So what I really started to focus on in my master's program was understanding the concept behind 360-degree feedback. And so it's actually in this book I brought with me. I talk about this book all the time. It's called Primal Leadership because it was really one of the first books that I read in my master's program that I felt like it had applicable things in it, and it really helped me to understand feedback from a 360-degree perspective. And so if you're not aware, 360-degree feedback says that you're receiving feedback 360 degrees, right? And so you're receiving feedback from your leaders, your peers, people that report to you if you are in a leadership position, everybody. And studies actually show that when people are in leadership, the success of that leader depends on the feedback from their direct reports, much more than it does their boss or their leader. So my work, the thing that I do, is a direct reflection of either my peers, but mostly the people who report to me, because they're the ones who are the receivers of how I am showing up. And so if I don't take the time to find out their feedback, I'm not growing, right? Your boss will probably give it because that's their job. But at the end of the day, you got to know how you're impacting the people around you. You got to know how you're impacting the people that report to you. And I would hate to be in a meeting with my peers or a meeting with my team members, and I'm constantly doing something that benefits no one. So I just always want to know, like, what can I do different? What would you change? How is your experience? How did this impact you? And I'm constantly asking those questions. And so there's this way to solicit feedback called a stop, start, continue. And you send to someone that you want feedback from, and you ask the question, what is something I should start doing, something I should stop doing, and something I should continue doing? And I have been getting information and feedback from people that I work with all around 360 degrees through that method, because I don't want to continue to go in the wrong direction. If we can have a discussion and do that perspective sharing, and I can get better and grow as a leader, as a team member, in all ways.
Okay, so you make it a point. So you asking you
I ask for it
every day. Like,
I want to
hey,
know what you're thinking.
It's my feedback for the day.
How you feel about me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so in my perspective, I do. Let's see. I may not ask for it as much, but I may work it into conversations depending on how the conversations go. So, and it could be it just know, like, as far as recipient, as in you're getting that feedback, it's asking for it so that you can get it in a different number of ways. Like you mentioned, the start, stop, continue. You can do that. Hey, verbalize it or send it out in an email, whatever the case may be. Or you can come up with a conversation. Hey, you got anything for me? A one-on-one conversation. Hey, what's up? You got anything for me? Anything I can improve on? And you keep it there. And a lot of times too, you can build that because if you ask somebody that you haven't asked before you receive it, know that you may receive it and it could have possibly come across in a task. Like, oh, there we go. I got to fill out this document.
Yeah.
Or now when you talk about, now it's value in that too. It's value, especially someone who you haven't received the feedback from. Also, when you have relationships with others, those peers that you're working with, just keep that communication open. That's why you're keeping that dialogue open, that communication open. As far as like, so if y'all are meeting up once a week or twice a week, whatever the case may be, like that's that opportunity to kind of touch base. Hey, anybody got anything, any feedback, and kind of like look for those opportunities. Now, what about when it's unsolicited? How do you feel about that?
No, I like it any way I can get it.
Yeah.
I will say that, even if it's unsolicited, most of the time, if I do get feedback that's unsolicited, not saying every time, but most of the time it's someone that they know me, that I'm looking for it. They trust that they can give it to me. They know that I'm going to give it to them. And so it's just that relationship is there. And I know you use that term a lot when it comes to giving and receiving feedback, is that relationship is there. And so I feel like that relationship is there. Like, I mean, you think about our relationship, you give me feedback on things and I might roll my eyes. Or I don't. No, I don't. Quit trying to label me as a debater, but I'm not. With you, maybe. But it is that you're not going to say, I'm going to wait for her to ask me how she feels. You're going to say, hey, blah, blah, a little less salt in the eggs, right? You're going to say the thing. And so will I. So I think that the relationship, a lot of times, And most times, that's where you get the unsolicited feedback. There might even be times where you don't get unsolicited feedback. So we use or you do get unsolicited feedback and you don't know the person. So last time we talked about broccoli in your teeth, right? I might not know the person, but I'm glad that they told me that I have broccoli in my teeth, unsolicited. So I look at it to see something, say something. And if you're with someone, I respect the fact that they can see something, say something. And to me, that actually builds trust, as long as they know how to provide it in a respectful manner, right? So I think I can get with anything as long as it's respectful. What about you with unsolicited feedback? I feel like you might have a different viewpoint. I can see it in your face.
And look, if I don't ask you for it,
no, I don't do that.
Seriously? No, just kidding. If it's, I can have the conversation. I'm definitely open to have the conversation. It all depends on where the person is coming from. Because I don't want this to sound as if it's like, all right, everybody come at you with information. Yep, take it. It could be something that can work to your advantage.
Yeah.
You said you look at it like I look at it different.
What?
You said you think I have a different perspective. I can appreciate if someone is offering game or something I didn't see, or a perspective to help a situation or me to get better. I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. But we talked about it last time. We talked about that energy in which is brought to the table. Because that energy that is presented in could very well be a turnoff. So you could probably take that energy, your perspective, and your feedback and go right back that way.
Okay, so we like to keep it real. So I feel like with you, I can give you unsolicited feedback, 100%. However, first thing in the morning, you don't want the unsolicited feedback. You would prefer that I would wait for us, depending on what it is, right?
What it is.
If it's something that's like we need to sit down and talk for a half an hour about it, that is not probably something you want in the first thing in the morning. Maybe that is because you're protecting your energy or you're sensitive of your energy in the morning. And so I know that I have to be cognizant of the time of day, be cognizant of the energy, how I share it with you. And I think that is very, very important for individuals to get very familiar with what their feedback preferences are. And so I lead with it, right? Since I like to ask for it all the time, I like to tell people how I need feedback, right? I need it in without assumption whenever possible. I need it to be in a conversational manner versus in writing. And keep it real. And if it's something nice to say, add that. So I'll know to continue in that direction with the praise or the positive thing. And so over time, I've learned what your feedback preferences are. But I do think that, especially when you think about your leader, who your leader 9 times out of 10 is going to give you feedback, right? Your peers might give you unsolicited feedback, making sure that you're communicating what your needs are so that you aren't labeled as defensive or you're not labeled as somebody who's combative or not coachable. What do you think about that?
That's true. Knowing your methods could definitely be used to your advantage, because as you mentioned, it's early in the morning. If you have some feedback and I'm getting ready to go work out, my mind is going to get this workout in. Let's hold that feedback.
I learned that through trial and error.
A little bit later.
After 11 o'clock a.m. it's okay.
On a Saturday, if I'm at home.
Okay.
And not do anything else. No, I think it's important to receive it. It's important to know your styles. It's very important to know your styles. And it's also important to set yourself up for that, because there's value in that. So there's one, be mindful is that if you're coming across as one that does not like to receive it, if one is coming across that way, I think there's something that can be done with that, such as perhaps having some communication, even proactively, about what those styles are. Because if someone has a nugget for you that you can use to your advantage, it's important for them to know how to deliver it.
Yeah.
Because they may not know how to approach it, but if they got something that you could use to be promoted or to get closer to those goals, it's important for you to set yourself up so that person can give that to you. So I agree. Definitely knowing how you receive it is very key. Very key.
Would you say there's any other things that when you're getting feedback, you need? So your own personal preferences or best practices in receiving it, or anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, I do like that I think the key, and we talked about, is like that timeliness that timeliness is extremely important. And that's why I know we're talking about receiving now, but that also ties into the giving portion as well. As far as like the sooner you can provide it as it happened, the better. And that shows a level of trust. That shows a level of respect, and you can also kind of like build a relationship on that. You say, okay, this person, this person cares. So when it comes to it, I think the main thing is like make sure that it's timely, and also you're aware of the space. Like for me, I'm more so like direct. Like if you give it to me, just say what you got, and I can take that and run with. And as far as like the conversational piece, it could come in a specified, intentional. Hey, I want to talk about because I have some feedback for you. That's cool as well. But also, if you keep it recurring, you keep it current. That's how you keep that that free flowing energy going on. So for instance, there's been a time where we ask for feedback, say, hey, you know what, you have some feedback for me. You may pause and think, and the answer might be no, because the feedback was already given throughout the month in those conversations. Now it might not come as like, hey, here's a feedback point, boom, 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 boom. Well, somebody might need that, but if it's staying open in conversation, that's the my preferred style as well. Yeah, if that relationship is like that.
Yeah, I agree. Timeliness, conversation, seek to understand my perspective, because if I did something, I put a lot of thought into it, and so there's a reason I did it.
Right.
Like I don't do something unless I can justify why I did it. That's just how I'm wired. So I want to at least be able to say that. Now, it might not have been the right move, or it might not have been the right decision, and I can deal with that. But at least care enough to understand why I did something before you just tell me don't do it again, right? That's helpful for me.
Yeah, and also one of the things as far as receiving it is, it's very appreciated if one makes an attempt to look at it from your perspective. So like if I have some feedback for you on something, it'll help if I look at it from your perspective, as far as like what you were dealing with from a personal standpoint as well, because that'll help to have that empathy in how it's come across as well. It's like, look at that person as an individual. And
I also think that at some point you have to make the decision as to whether or not you can assume positive intent. Because like you said this earlier, it might not come out in the perfect feedback situation exactly like you would like it on your best day of receiving feedback. But taking a step back from the delivery for a moment and really being able to process what was being said and assume positive intent instead of assuming that this person is hating on you.
That's true. Yeah.
Not everybody hating on you.
Not everybody. Yeah.
I am telling you this because I want to honor you with the truth. The broccoli is in your teeth, and I don't want you to look stupid.
Right.
So it's not me hating on you. It is me invested enough in you. Because if you're not invested in a person, you won't say nothing, right? But I'm invested enough in you to see something, say something, and try what I can in order to assist you along your journey. So I think that is really important. But assuming positive intent can go a long way.
I love it.
Okay.
What else we got?
I think that's good. That's it. As far as receiving feedback, I think that it's definitely a journey. It's not always easy. And I like that we talked about how it can, make your stomach knot up a little bit. Yeah. It can make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. But if you can step back from it, you can really find out if there's gold at the end of the rainbow. So
that's true. What can we challenge the listeners with?
Oh my gosh. So when you are thinking about feedback that you have received, really just thinking about what have you received that has impacted you in a positive way. So this isn't, I know Mike likes to make you put things in the comment. This is mostly for your self-reflection. Reflect on feedback that you've received in the past and how it's benefited you. And not just focus on the pieces of feedback that don't quite feel right. Because sometimes people struggle with how to provide feedback, which we talked about a lot last time. But sometimes there is some gold and some nuggets that can actually help you grow once you learn how to process versus internalize it. So I'm gonna leave them on that. I will also leave you with please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share this. If you feel that what we talked about today was beneficial to you, it could benefit someone else when it comes to receiving feedback, feel free to do that as well. And then you can always feel free to check out this Primal Leadership book. I highly recommend. It talks a lot about emotional intelligence and leadership and how those things are combined. So I really like it because of that. But other than that, this is the Woods Collab.
We out.